Most people believe that a better life requires more. More goals, more habits, more productivity, more effort, more improvement. This pursuit of accumulation is the default setting of modern society, a never-ending quest to add, to acquire, to ascend. We are conditioned to believe that every problem requires a new solution, every deficiency a new resource, and every ambition an added complexity. If your career feels stuck, the advice is do more. If your relationship feels strained, try more. If you feel lost, add more goals, more tools, more inputs. But there is an ancient truth, quiet, counterintuitive, and often ignored. Sometimes the thing missing in your life isn't more, it's less. Less noise, less complexity, less obligation, less of the unnecessary static that stops you from hearing your own signal. The path to a meaningful existence is often found not in accumulation, but in purification. The highest forms of achievement across art, philosophy, and science are rarely celebrated for their complexity. They are remembered for their elegance, their efficiency, and their profound simplicity. A brilliant proof in mathematics is one that collapses a page of equations into a few lines. A masterpiece of design isn't the object with the most features. It's the one where nothing unnecessary remains. A great life often looks the same way, simple, focused, aligned. But to live this way, we have to unlearn something very deep, our addiction to more. And we begin not with action, but with a story. Let's start with a story, the Zen lesson of the overflowing cup. There's an old Zen story that perfectly encapsulates the power of subtraction. If you've heard it before, listen again, not as a parable, but as a mirror. A highly educated student, known for his intelligence and impressive memory, traveled across the mountains to meet a revered Zen master. He wanted enlightenment. He wanted wisdom. But if he was honest, he also wanted confirmation that he was already close. He arrived at the monastery, dust on his shoes, ego in full shine. The master welcomed him warmly and invited him to sit. Before the student could stop himself, he began talking about the books he had read, the philosophies he had studied, the arguments he had debated. He listed his degrees, his teachers, his insights. He spoke about psychology and religion, Eastern thought, and Western logic. He spoke to impress, but also to reassure himself, I am not starting from zero. I already know so much. While the student kept talking, the master quietly prepared tea. He picked up the teapot and began pouring tea into the student's cup. The student glanced down but continued speaking. The cup filled. The master kept pouring. The tea reached the brim, then it overflowed. The hot liquid spilled over the edge, across the table, onto the student's robes, and began dripping onto the floor. Startled, the student jumped up. Stop! The cup is full. You can't put any more tea in it. The master paused. He looked at the overflowing cup, then at the student. And with a calm voice he said, Your mind is like this cup. It is full of opinions, assumptions, and noise. I cannot pour wisdom into a cup that is already overflowing. The student fell silent. No clever reply. No intellectual defense. Just quiet. In that moment, when his cup was finally empty, he was ready, maybe for the first time in his life, to actually learn. The moral of this story is not that knowledge is bad. Knowledge is powerful. Information is useful. Learning is vital. But saturation is the enemy of growth. If your mental cup is constantly overflowing, with information, with input, with obligations, with noise, there is simply no space for the new idea, the fresh perspective, or the deep, quiet work required for genuine transformation. You cannot meaningfully absorb a new concept, develop a new skill, or pursue a large goal if your mental bandwidth is already consumed by trivial maintenance. Subtraction begins with this realization. It's not that you are incapable of growth. It's that there is no room for growth to land. Before you can build the life you want, you must clear out what no longer belongs. Now, let's talk about the illusion of more and the true cost of clutter. We live in a world that relentlessly worships addition. From childhood, we are told to strive for more achievements, more possessions, more stimulation, more certificates, more followers. We scroll through endless feeds, sign up for unnecessary commitments, add one more project just in case, and overload our calendars, then proudly label this frantic pace as ambition. But addition has a cost that is rarely accounted for. Every extra thing, whether physical, emotional, mental, or digital, takes space. And space, time, clarity, attention is life's most valuable and most finite resource. Clutter isn't just an aesthetic problem. It's a performance problem, a psychological problem, a mental problem. Let's look at 4 domains where more quietly erodes our quality of life. First, physical clutter. Imagine walking into a room where every surface is covered. Papers, books, boxes, clothes you meant to donate 3 years ago, gadgets you never use but feel oddly guilty about letting go. You may not consciously notice every object, but your brain does. Every unused gadget, every extra piece of furniture, every stack of paper demands small decisions. Where does this go? Should I keep this? Should I throw this away? When will I finally organize this? This constant low-level decision-making creates an invisible maintenance tax on your energy. You tell yourself, I just need a free weekend to sort it all out. But that weekend never comes. Meanwhile, your environment whispers, you are behind. You are unfinished. You are not in control. Research on stress and home environments shows that people who describe their homes as cluttered or full of unfinished projects report higher levels of stress and fatigue. Physical clutter is not just stuff. It's a visual representation of unresolved decisions and unclosed loops. In a very real sense, a cluttered room is a cluttered to-do list, made visible. Subtraction here isn't about minimalism as a trend. It's about reclaiming mental and emotional bandwidth that's being silently drained. Now let's step into a different kind of chaos, the digital one. Hundreds of unread emails, dozens of group chats, apps you haven't opened in months, notifications you don't remember enabling, subscriptions quietly billing you every month. This is the modern equivalent of an overflowing attic, except it's in your pocket and it travels with you everywhere. Psychologists call part of this burden cognitive overload. When the brain is forced to hold and juggle too many inputs, its clarity drops. Its decision quality declines. Emotional regulation becomes harder. Every time you check your phone for just a second, you pay a hidden cost. You fragment your focus, then your brain has to spend extra energy just to reassemble it. That tiny red badge that says 97 unread emails is not neutral. It is a constant signal. You are behind. There is something waiting. You should be doing more. Subtraction here doesn't mean rejecting technology. It means becoming ruthless about what deserves your attention. Turn off non-essential notifications. Unsubscribe from digital noise. Delete apps that don't serve a clear purpose. You're not just clearing your phone. You're clearing your mind. Now, internal clutter. Subtraction doesn't apply only to your environment and devices. It applies inside your body too. Modern life encourages us to constantly add to our internal system. More snacks, more sugar, more processed foods, more late-night meals, more caffeine to push through fatigue. We treat the body like a machine that can run 24/7 if we just pump it full of inputs. But every extra unnecessary input creates friction. Poor quality fuel doesn't just affect the body. It affects your mind. Brain fog, energy crashes, irritability, difficulty concentrating. Just like a cluttered desk slows down your thinking, a diet cluttered with inflammatory, low-nutrient foods slows down both body and mind. Subtraction here means not eat nothing, but stop eating what constantly drains you. Maybe it's cutting back on sugary drinks. Maybe it's removing one processed snack from your daily routine. Maybe it's subtracting late-night heavy meals so your body can actually rest. The goal isn't perfection. The goal is less friction. By subtracting the foods and substances that create internal chaos, you clear the way for energy, focus, and emotional stability to become your default state. And finally, emotional clutter. Some clutter never shows up on a shelf or a screen. It lives in your mind and body as tension. This is the clutter of unresolved conflict, unspoken truths, and expectations that haven't been updated in years. The resentment you carry from a conversation that went wrong, the anger towards someone who never apologized, the disappointment in yourself that you keep replaying. On the surface, you function. You work, you talk, you laugh, but in the background, emotional processes run constantly. It's like leaving 30 apps open on your phone. Battery drains, performance slows, everything feels heavier than it should. Carrying long-stored resentment is like forcing your mind to run heavy background operations 24/7. Subtraction here might mean having a difficult conversation, writing a letter you never send, letting go of an apology you may never receive, or releasing an expectation of who someone should have been. Emotional subtraction is not about forgetting. It is about releasing the belief that clinging to pain protects you. You don't lighten your life by waiting for the past to change. You lighten it by subtracting the grip it holds on you. The illusion of more equals better is a trap. It leads us to believe that the solution to complexity is more complexity. In truth, the primary constraint on performance and happiness is not our lack of resources, but our lack of strategic removal. The question is not always, what else do I need? More often it is, what can I finally let go of? Now, let's go deeper into a principle ancient civilizations understood long before we did. The wisest minds throughout history understood something we are only beginning to rediscover. Progress is often subtractive. Across civilizations, one principle appears again and again. Improvement comes not from adding, but from removing. In philosophy, this principle is called via negativa, Latin for the negative way, or the path of subtraction. Instead of asking, what can we add to fix this, via negativa asks, what can we remove that is causing harm? Let's see how this appears in a few domains. First, the Stoics. The Stoic philosophers didn't chase a life of perpetual excitement. They sought tranquility, a calm, unshakable inner state. Their method wasn't to add more pleasure, more praise, more external success. Their method was to subtract. Subtract irrational fears, subtract excessive desires, subtract emotional reactions that didn't serve them. Seneca warned against constantly changing plans or chasing novelty. To him, a restless mind wasn't a sign of ambition, it was a symptom of inner instability. For the Stoics, freedom was found not in having everything, but in needing less. Next, engineering. In engineering, the systems that last the longest are often the ones with the fewest moving parts. Every extra component introduces a potential point of failure. The more complex the system, the more fragile it often becomes. A good engineer asks, what can we remove without losing the core function? Airplane designers build redundancy where it matters, but they also fight unnecessary complexity. Software engineers refactor code to simplify it because bloated code breaks. In many cases, the best intervention is no intervention. Subtract interference. Allow the system to self-correct. Then design. Legendary industrial designer Dieter Rams summed up good design in 3 words, less but better. Great design is not about throwing in every feature that could possibly exist. It's about carefully removing everything that doesn't serve the purpose. The result is something that feels intuitive, clean, timeless. We recognize beauty not by how much is present, but by how little is wasted. And finally, sculpture. Sculpture makes this principle visible. The statue isn't created from nothing. In a sense, it already exists inside the stone. The sculptor's job is not to add clay, but to remove everything that isn't the statue. Every strike of the chisel is an act of subtraction. Every piece that falls away brings the intended form into sharper focus. Your life, in many ways, is the same. The core of who you are, your values, your potential, your unique combination of gifts is already there. Subtraction is the process of removing everything that hides it. Via Negativa demands a new foundational question. Instead of asking, what should I do next year? What should I add tomorrow? We ask, what should I stop doing today? That question changes everything. Now let's make this practical. Transformation doesn't begin by trying to fix everything at once. That's just another version of addition, adding too many expectations. True change is rarely dramatic. It is usually the result of incremental subtraction. We begin with one intentional removal. Here are 5 key areas where subtraction creates meaningful, immediate, and lasting change. First, remove one toxic habit. 1. A toxic habit is any recurring behavior that steals your time, energy, or clarity without giving back real value. It might be late-night scrolling, snacking out of boredom, arguing in online comment sections, checking your phone the second you wake up, or complaining instead of problem-solving. The cue is the trigger. The routine is the behavior. The reward is the feeling you get: relief, distraction, comfort. Most people try to attack the routine. I will stop eating junk. I will stop scrolling at night. But as long as the cue remains in place, your brain will keep pulling you back. Subtraction means removing or modifying the cue. Removing the snack from the house, charging your phone in another room, blocking the website that pulls you into endless arguments. You're not fighting your willpower every night. You're rearranging your environment so the toxic habit has nowhere to live. And here's the deeper impact. When you successfully remove one harmful habit, even a small one, you prove something to yourself. I am someone who can change. That identity shift is worth more than the habit itself. Second, limit one distraction. Not every distraction is dangerous, but every distraction has a cost. The question is not, is this distraction evil? The question is, how often am I letting it hijack my focus? You don't have to become a monk. You don't have to throw your phone into the ocean. You can start with a simple strategic filter. Turn off all notifications except calls and calendar alerts. Decide 1 or 2 specific times a day to check messages. Move social media off your home screen. Attention is not infinite. It is currency. Every time you allow a distraction to interrupt you, you are making a silent transaction. You are trading depth for stimulation and progress for noise. By subtracting one major category of distraction, or even just limiting its access to specific windows of time, you reclaim control over the pace of your life. You become the one who decides when your attention is available. Third, drop one outdated identity. Identity shapes behavior. What you repeatedly tell yourself about who you are becomes the script you follow. The problem is that many identities are outdated. A belief you adopted 10 years ago still quietly runs your life today. I'm bad with money. I'm always the fixer. I'm not a disciplined person. I'm the one who never finishes. These are not facts. They are stories. They might have been true once. They might not have ever been fully true. But they became familiar, and so you kept them. Subtraction here means asking, who have I outgrown but continue to be out of habit? Maybe you once were financially careless, but today you're watching this, learning, growing. Maybe you once avoided responsibility, but today you show up differently. You don't have to fight your entire identity in one day. You can quietly drop one label. I am bad with money becomes I am someone learning to handle money wisely. I never finish anything becomes I am someone who is building the skill of finishing. By subtracting the harsh absolute identity, you create space for a truer one to emerge. Fourth, end one obligation that no longer serves you. Some commitments enter our lives with a clear purpose, but not everything that was right once remains right forever. Maybe it's a committee you joined years ago that now drains you, a group chat that always pulls you into drama, a weekly call you dread but keep saying yes to, a favor that turned into a recurring obligation. There is wisdom in honoring commitments. There is also wisdom in recognizing when a commitment has silently turned into a cage. Subtraction here begins with an emotional audit. Look at your calendar. Look at your recurring obligations. For each one, ask, does this give me energy or take it away? Does this align with who I am today, not who I was when I said yes? If I were offered this commitment fresh now, would I agree? If the honest answer is no, you are dealing with an obligation that belongs to your past, not your future. Ending it may feel uncomfortable, but so is staying trapped. You are allowed to complete a chapter without making yourself the villain of the story. Subtraction here is an act of self-respect. And finally, say no 10% more. You don't need a personality transplant. You don't need to become cold or detached. You just need to say no a little sooner and a little more often. Every time you say yes to something new, you are automatically saying no to something else, often without realizing it. Yes to an unnecessary meeting might mean no to an hour of sleep. Yes to a social event you don't care about might mean no to time with your family. Yes to every request often means no to your own priorities. Boundaries are not walls. They are filters. They don't cut out everything. They protect what matters most from what matters less. Just saying no 10% more often can become the single greatest accelerant for your most important goals. Because subtraction doesn't just clear space, it concentrates your power. Now, let's zoom back out and talk about your body. The principle of via negativa becomes especially powerful when applied to the most essential system you manage, your body. We've already talked about diet, but let's go one layer deeper. A subtractive approach to your body asks, what if I focused less on adding miracle solutions and more on removing what keeps me tired and foggy? Modern health trends talk endlessly about what to add: more supplements, more superfoods, more hacks. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to stop punching holes in your own energy tank. Subtraction here isn't punishment. It's permission. Permission for your body to do what it already knows how to do: repair, restore, rebalance. When the body is less burdened, the mind becomes clearer. You think better not because you forced your brain to work harder, but because you removed the friction that was constantly slowing it down. Next, let's talk about focus and attention. The subtractive approach is uniquely powerful for anyone who struggles with focus, whether from ADHD, chronic busyness, or simply a brain overloaded by inputs. The core challenge is not always a lack of attention. It is too many competing demands on attention. Subtraction addresses this directly. An ADHD brain, or any overstimulated brain, is especially sensitive to external chaos. A desk covered in objects, a browser with 20 open tabs, a phone that lights up every few minutes. Each new cue is a possible doorway, and the brain gets pulled again and again away from what matters. By applying physical and digital subtraction, you immediately reduce the number of cues that can hijack your mind. A minimalist workspace is not about aesthetics. It's about reducing the number of battles your brain has to fight just to stay on track. When you give a cluttered mind a long, complex list of goals, it freezes. Subtraction says choose one priority, one clear outcome for this block of time. You're not forcing the mind to be superhuman. You're reducing the options so that deep focus becomes more likely. The brain doesn't just need motivation. It needs the relief of knowing what it does not have to do right now. Calm is often not something you add. It's something that appears when agitation is removed. When you subtract unnecessary obligations, emotional clutter, and constant digital interruptions, your baseline stress naturally lowers. You don't have to manufacture peace. You just stop feeding chaos. Now, let's talk about subtraction in performance and prosperity. One of the greatest myths in productivity is that the person with the most tools and the most complex system wins. But when you look at top performers in any field, you see something else. They are subtractive. They simplify. They narrow. They remove. There comes a point where more effort, more strategies, more systems stop producing more results. After that point, more doesn't help. It hurts. You don't need 7 productivity apps. You don't need 5 overlapping routines. You don't need 3 different goal frameworks. You need one approach that you actually use. Great investors don't win by constantly adding more and more exotic assets. They win by avoiding big mistakes, by subtracting emotional decisions, by refusing to act on every spike of fear or greed. Their edge is less about what they buy and more about what they don't do. Great writing isn't powerful because of how much the writer says. It's powerful because of how much the writer leaves out. Ernest Hemingway's style, clean, direct, sharp, is a masterclass in subtracting the unnecessary. Editing is nothing more than this, subtracting what doesn't belong so that what matters can finally be seen. Prosperity isn't just about earning more, it's about preserving energy, focusing effort, protecting time. As Peter Drucker famously said, there is nothing so useless as doing efficiently what never should have been done. Subtraction is the tool that helps you see what never should have been done in the first place. Now, let's talk about designing a subtractive life. The ultimate expression of via negativa is not a one-time declutter. It is the conscious design of a life built on sufficiency, not surplus. Imagine starting your week with a completely blank calendar. Before you add any meetings, tasks, or social events, you first block out the non-negotiables: sleep, deep work on your most important project, movement or exercise, time with the people who matter most, time for reflection, reading, or learning. Only after these essentials are protected do you begin to add anything else. This is subtraction by design. Instead of trying to squeeze what matters into the cracks of a crowded schedule, you subtract the illusion that everything deserves a spot. Most things don't. You can apply the same principle to many parts of life. Trade breadth for depth, quantity for quality. Capsule wardrobe. Instead of an overflowing wardrobe, you build a capsule wardrobe. A small number of high-quality pieces you actually wear and love. Capsule knowledge. Instead of trying to read 50 books a year, you choose 5 truly important ones and go deep, taking notes, revisiting, mastering. You trade breadth for depth, quantity for quality, information for wisdom. This isn't about deprivation. It's about deliberate focus. A subtractive life is not an empty life. It is a life where what remains truly matters. So now, here's the turning point. The coming year, any year, will bring new demands, new opportunities, and endless temptations to add. Add new goals. Add new tools. Add new commitments. But before you rush to add, pause and ask, what would my life look like if I removed instead of added? If you trusted subtraction as much as ambition? If you believed that simplification was not weakness but strength? The biggest leaps in human performance and personal happiness rarely come from the next big strategy. They come from the courage to strip away what is no longer essential. You don't need a new year. You don't need a milestone. You don't need anyone's permission. You just need the courage to ask one question honestly: what no longer belongs? Choose one thing to subtract: a habit, a belief, a role, a distraction, a commitment. Just one. Because one honest subtraction can permanently alter your trajectory. And now, the closing challenge. So here's the challenge, and it requires action, not just reflection. Go to the comments and name the single thing you are subtracting from your life today. Is it a distraction? A commitment? A story you've been telling yourself for too long? Write it down. There is power in naming it, in turning subtraction from an idea into a decision. You don't need more motivation. You need less interference. You don't need more goals. You need fewer contradictions. You don't need a new life. You need space for the life that is already waiting inside you. If today's videos resonated with you, please like this video, subscribe, and share it forward. Together, we're building a world where wisdom is practical, accessible, and deeply human. Thank you for watching, and as always, think deeply, live wisely. See you next week in the next episode.